The email arrived at exactly 8:42 on a Tuesday morning. The subject line read "Wedding Update." It was sent by my younger sister Chloe. It was not an update. It was a formal eviction notice from her life. She wrote that my presence would bring negative energy to her aesthetic. She said my practical mindset clashed with her high-vibration luxury experience. Therefore, I was no longer welcome at the ceremony or the reception. My name is Marcus. I am 32 years old. I live in downtown Chicago. I work as a senior logistics architect for global hospitality supply chains. I secure high-level vendor contracts for events exceeding $1 million. I deal in risk mitigation, master service agreements, and binding liability clauses. I read the email twice. I did not feel angry. I felt a profound sense of clarity. Chloe was spending $92,450 on this wedding. I knew the exact number. I knew it because my signature was on the primary vendor underwriter agreement. Tell me something. If you received an email banning you from a family event, where would you be sitting? What exact time would it be? Let me tell you where I was. I was at my desk. I was looking at the master routing schedule for the upcoming weekend. Chloe wanted a flawless luxury event. She wanted cascading floral installations. She wanted custom imported lighting rigs. She wanted bespoke catering from an exclusive local collective. She just did not want me there to consume the food. The problem was simple. Chloe lacked basic logistical awareness. She assumed the wedding infrastructure existed by sheer magic. She thought she signed the final contracts. She only signed the aesthetic approvals. The actual binding service agreements were tied directly to my corporate procurement profile. I secured them using my executive industry discount. She banned me, but she fully expected my logistical framework to remain active. She thought I would absorb the insult and let the event proceed. That is not how a supply chain operates. When a core asset is removed from a project, the dependencies fail. My presence was not just a family courtesy. My presence was the literal structural foundation of her event. She permanently severed our personal relationship. She did not realize she also severed the power grid and catering supply line. I closed the email and opened my portal. My family operates on a simple deficit model. I act as the permanent creditor. They are perpetual debtors who refuse to balance the ledger. This dynamic began exactly 7 years ago when I secured my first executive logistics role. My base compensation crossed a significant threshold. Suddenly, I became the primary contingency plan for every manufactured crisis. My parents view my professional stability as a shared communal asset. My mother calls it nurturing the family ecosystem. I call it an unmitigated operational resource drain. Over 36 months, I absorbed exactly $41,210 in their emergencies. A transmission replacement for my father and a failed boutique venture for my mother. And then there is my younger sister Chloe. Chloe is the golden child of this toxic infrastructure. She specializes in weaponized incompetence and creates catastrophic personal debt. My parents deploy emotional manipulation to force me into liquidating her crises. Whenever I try to establish strict boundaries, the aggressive gaslighting immediately begins. My mother tells me my analytical mindset makes me cold and transactional. She claims real family requires unconditional financial support, but that support only ever flows in a single direction. I am the designated load-bearing pillar for their lavish lifestyle. The wedding planning phase was the ultimate apex of this parasitic behavior. Chloe demanded a premier luxury venue for her reception. She selected the historical Botanical Conservatory downtown. The baseline facility fee alone was $18,500. She did not have the necessary capital to secure the date. My parents lacked the required liquidity to cover the initial deposit. They cornered me at a holiday dinner and demanded a temporary bridge loan. They promised Chloe would reimburse me using her anticipated cash wedding gifts as collateral. From a strict risk assessment perspective, it was a highly toxic subprime loan. I explicitly declined the direct cash transfer. I knew those funds would immediately vaporize into frivolous aesthetic spending. Instead, I leveraged my professional procurement network to secure the core operational contracts. I absorbed the deposit liabilities strictly to protect my own credit utilization profile. I effectively became the prime logistical contractor for her luxury aesthetic experience. This deliberate maneuver saved them 22% on baseline operational overhead. They never acknowledged the margin reduction or the massive financial risk I assumed. They simply believed it was their inherent right to relentlessly exploit my professional capital. Chloe believed a $90,000 wedding simply assembled itself. She selected the blush peonies and the expensive gold charger plates. She tasted the braised short rib and the vegan mushroom risotto. She completely ignored the complex supply chain required to deliver those assets. She did not comprehend the cold mechanics of heavy-capacity event logistics. My professional dashboard is a proprietary executive procurement portal. It connects directly to the premier regional vendor networks across the Midwest. Through this portal, I hold 3 specific master service agreements for her event. The first is a comprehensive climate control and power generation contract. The Botanical Conservatory lacks the necessary electrical grid to support her custom lighting. I secured twin silent diesel generators for the exterior loading dock. I routed the distribution cables through union-approved safety channels. Without my active authorization, those generators never leave the commercial depot. The second binding agreement governs the mobile culinary infrastructure. The chosen venue does not possess a commercial preparation kitchen. It is merely a delicate historical greenhouse. I drafted the site logistics plan for 2 heavy-duty refrigeration trucks. I coordinated the delivery manifests and secured the temporary parking permits from the city. The primary caterer relies entirely on these specific municipal permits to operate legally. My family assumes the catering company inherently handles these granular details. They do not. The caterer requires a bonded primary contractor to assume localized liability. I am that bonded contractor on the master certificate of insurance. The third major asset is the financial payment structure itself. I instituted a strict net 30 disbursement schedule for the pending final balances. This means the premier vendors dispatch their equipment based on my verified corporate credit profile. My digital signature acts as the absolute guarantee of institutional payment. My sister essentially built a massive luxury event entirely on my invisible operational foundation. My parents continuously assumed my quiet labor meant passive and total compliance. They openly mocked my tracking spreadsheets and my vendor risk assessment matrix. They laughed dismissively whenever I requested granular delivery timelines during our mandatory Sunday dinners. They deeply misunderstood the cold power dynamics of elite commercial procurement. I was the entirely unseen institutional architect sustaining her perfect luxury aesthetic day. They failed to realize a singular and highly crucial operational truth. The person who holds the active master service agreements controls the physical reality of the event. The email banning me from the wedding triggered a precise contractual mechanism. I did not text my sister to argue or demand a fabricated apology. I did not call my mother to negotiate my attendance. Their toxic actions had finally met a rigid corporate boundary. I simply opened my executive procurement portal and initiated a systematic operational withdrawal. The withdrawal process is entirely clinical and requires zero emotional investment. I navigated to the active vendor dashboard for the Botanical Conservatory event. I located the master service agreement governing the twin silent diesel generators. I clicked the cancellation module and cited a breach of primary authorized access. The clause was Section 4B of the vendor underwriting agreement. It states that the bonded contractor must have unrestricted physical access to the venue. My sister had just documented my banishment in writing. I attached her eviction email as formal PDF evidence of the contractual breach. The generator company immediately processed the cancellation and released the asset holds. The firm issued a full refund of $6,200 directly back to my corporate holding account. Next, I logged into the municipal permit portal for the City Parking Authority. I held the commercial zoning variances for the 2 heavy-duty refrigeration trucks. These variances cost $485 each and required my primary signature. I withdrew my liability sponsorship and submitted a formal permit revocation request. The municipal system automatically flagged the catering company operating profile with a critical compliance error. Without those specific street variances, the refrigeration trucks legally cannot idle within 3 blocks. The caterer would be completely unable to store or prepare the raw perishable ingredients. I watched the digital status indicator turn from active green to a terminal red. The final step involved the core certificate of liability insurance. The venue required a $2 million commercial general liability policy to host the reception. My corporate umbrella policy was actively providing that crucial structural coverage. I contacted my dedicated commercial underwriter at exactly 9:14 that morning. I instructed him to immediately detach my policy rider from the Botanical Conservatory location. He asked no questions and executed the digital removal protocol within 90 seconds. The historical venue instantly lost its required insurance compliance to host a private function. The venue administration would receive an automated compliance failure notice within 48 hours. The quiet severance was now entirely complete. I felt a profound sense of operational tranquility. I did not send a warning text to my family or the wedding planner. I simply allowed the automated vendor systems to process the catastrophic structural failures. My sister wanted a high-vibration luxury experience completely free of my negative energy. I was merely fulfilling her exact written request by removing my foundational logistical assets. The ecosystem she took for granted was now completely offline. She was now totally and completely isolated from reality. She banned the architect, but expected the building to stand. The total collapse was mathematically guaranteed. The initial panic erupted exactly 41 hours after my quiet severance protocol. It started at 2:14 on a Thursday afternoon. My phone screen illuminated with an incoming call from the exclusive local catering collective. I let it route to my secure voicemail. They left a highly urgent 2-minute message regarding their critical municipal parking variances. The caterer explained they received an automated compliance failure notice from the city authority. They could not legally position their refrigeration trucks near the delicate historical venue. They desperately needed me to reauthorize the liability sponsorship immediately. I archived the voice message and calmly sipped my black coffee. 6 minutes later, my mother initiated the direct family escalation phase. She did not call. She deployed a barrage of 7 consecutive text messages. The texts were completely unhinged and lacked basic capitalization. She demanded to know why the venue administration was threatening to cancel the entire reception. The Botanical Conservatory had received the automated insurance termination notice from my underwriter. They informed my sister she had exactly 24 hours to secure a replacement $2 million liability policy. Commercial underwriting simply does not process emergency event riders on a Friday afternoon. My mother commanded me to fix the clerical error right now. She tried to frame my deliberate structural withdrawal as an accidental technical glitch. She refused to acknowledge the direct consequence of the aggressive eviction email. At 3:30, Chloe finally broke her strict aesthetic silence and called me. I answered the phone on the 3rd ring to establish a neutral baseline power dynamic. She was fully hysterical and weeping loudly into the receiver. She screamed that I was deliberately sabotaging her perfect luxury, aesthetic experience out of pure jealousy. She demanded I instantly reinstate the silent diesel generators and the catering variances. I remained completely silent until she paused to take a frantic, gasping breath. I spoke in a low and highly measured cadence. I informed her I was merely respecting her strict boundary regarding my negative energy. I explained that Section 4B of the Master Service Agreement required my physical presence. Because she explicitly banned me from the venue in writing, I was legally compelled to withdraw my liability coverage. I could not risk my corporate procurement profile on an event I could not actively monitor. The gaslighting immediately intensified to a severe degree. Chloe claimed the eviction email was simply a misunderstanding caused by massive wedding planning stress. She insisted I was overreacting to a minor emotional outburst and acting maliciously. My father merged onto the call and deployed his heavy guilt tactics. He stated that family always supports family regardless of petty arguments. He ordered me to pay whatever emergency fees were required to restore the logistics framework. I declined his specific operational directive. I stated clearly that my financial infrastructure was no longer available for their exploitation. I terminated the active call and placed both of their numbers on a silent secondary routing protocol. My family immediately attempted to circumvent my authority and restore the logistics manually. They believed they could bypass my corporate restrictions by speaking directly to the primary vendors. This was a catastrophic tactical error based entirely on deep systemic ignorance. They severely underestimated the rigid compliance structures of high-capacity event logistics. The vendors do not care about family drama or emotional manipulation tactics. Vendors care exclusively about binding underwriting agreements and verified lines of credit. My father marched down to the silent diesel generator depot on Friday morning. He attempted to rent the heavy equipment using his personal platinum credit card. He assumed money was the only required variable to secure the machinery. He failed to realize the generators required a specialized union-certified technician to initiate the connection. My master service agreement included the exclusive technical labor required to run the main cables. The depot manager informed my father that emergency union labor cannot be booked 24 hours prior to a weekend event. Furthermore, my father lacked the commercial insurance rider to transport the industrial equipment. He was denied service and politely asked to leave the commercial loading zone. Meanwhile, Chloe attempted to pressure the venue administration into ignoring the liability lapse. She leveraged her aesthetic vision and cried in the Botanical Conservatory Management Office. The management team remained entirely unsympathetic to her manufactured emotional crisis. The historical greenhouse is heavily subsidized by severe municipal grants and strict preservation laws. They absolutely cannot risk an uninsured luxury reception damaging their rare exotic plant collections. They handed Chloe a strict administrative ultimatum. Provide the $2 million commercial liability rider by 3 o'clock, or the doors remain permanently locked. The caterer delivered the final devastating blow to their desperate contingency plans. Without the municipal parking variances, the refrigeration trucks could not legally idle. The premier local collective officially triggered their emergency termination clause. They refused to prepare the braised short rib and the vegan mushroom risotto in a compromised environment. They confiscated the initial food deposit to cover their sunk preparation costs. They formally withdrew their service from the event and recalled their entire wait staff. I sat at my desk and monitored the systemic failure through my vendor portal. I was actively gathering highly specific administrative receipts. Every time a vendor logged a cancellation notice or a compliance failure, I generated a PDF timestamp. I compiled a comprehensive dossier of their complete logistical incompetence. I documented the exact timeline of how my deliberate withdrawal caused the total systemic collapse. They tried to build a high-vibration luxury experience on a foundation of pure exploitation. They had successfully evicted the prime contractor. Now they were trapped beneath the crushing weight of their own administrative ignorance. The structural collapse was absolute and totally irreversible. The systemic collapse forced my family into a temporary and highly calculated retreat. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday evening. By Friday night at 7 o'clock, the entire infrastructure was completely dead. The venue was locked due to strict insurance compliance failures. The caterer had formally withdrawn and confiscated the initial perishable deposits. The silent diesel generators were securely parked at the Union Commercial Depot. My sister had $92,000 of aesthetic elements with absolutely nowhere to deploy them. The cascading floral installations were sitting in unrefrigerated delivery vans, slowly wilting in the evening humidity. My mother initiated the false truce protocol via a group text message. She requested an immediate emergency summit at my downtown apartment to negotiate a final resolution. She promised full transparency and absolute accountability for the previous misunderstandings. I recognized this tactic instantly from years of toxic behavioral patterns. It was the classic parental maneuver designed to force a reluctant compliance through sheer physical proximity. They believed if they occupied my personal space, they could break my analytical detachment. They intended to deploy a massive wave of emotional guilt to shatter my rigid corporate boundaries. I agreed to the emergency summit. I did not agree because I intended to reinstate their luxury event framework. I agreed because I wanted to observe their desperation from a position of absolute logistical supremacy. They arrived at my apartment at 8:15. My father looked exhausted and deeply angry. My mother carried a tray of my favorite bakery items as a pathetic peace offering. Chloe was completely silent and wore dark sunglasses to hide her heavily swollen eyes. They sat on my leather sofa and immediately launched into a highly rehearsed performance. My mother spoke first. She utilized a soft and deeply manipulative vocal register. She told me the family was fundamentally broken without my stable presence. She claimed Chloe was intensely remorseful regarding the harsh wording of the original eviction email. My father then deployed the heavy financial guilt pressure. He stated that the family would face total financial ruin if the wedding did not proceed. He demanded I utilize my elite professional network to force the vendors back online. He even promised to sign a legally binding promissory note for the emergency reinstatement fees. They presented this complete fabrication as a legitimate and honorable business negotiation. I sat in my armchair and listened to their desperate symphony of lies. I did not touch the bakery items. I knew they possessed zero liquidity to back a legitimate promissory note. I knew Chloe only regretted the systemic failure and not the actual insult. They were not seeking a genuine reconciliation of our severed dynamic. They were merely trying to reactivate the prime operational contractor for 24 hours. They needed the master service agreements. They did not need a son or a brother. I maintained total eye contact and allowed the silence to stretch for a painfully long time. The silence in my apartment stretched into a profound and suffocating tension. My mother finally broke the quiet by demanding an immediate operational timeline for the vendor reinstatement. She pulled out a small notebook and aggressively clicked her pen. She expected me to dictate the emergency recovery sequence. She expected me to call the underwriter and the union depot manager on a Friday night. I did not reach for my phone. I reached for the sleek black folder resting on my glass coffee table. I opened the folder and extracted the comprehensive administrative dossier I had compiled. I handed the first document directly to my father. It was the formal liability withdrawal confirmation from my commercial underwriter. I handed the second document to my mother. It was the municipal permit revocation notice regarding the critical refrigeration trucks. I handed the final document to my sister. It was a printed copy of her original eviction email. I highlighted the specific sentence where she explicitly banned my negative energy from her luxury aesthetic experience. Are you paying attention to this sequence? Have you ever watched a delusion shatter in real time? My father stared at the liability withdrawal confirmation with complete incomprehension. He began to loudly demand an explanation for my catastrophic sabotage. I stopped him immediately. I spoke with absolute clinical precision. I informed them there was no emergency recovery sequence to dictate. I explained that high-capacity event logistics do not operate on emotional apologies or fabricated promissory notes. I told them the Botanical Conservatory would never allow an uninsured event to cross their historical threshold. I confirmed the caterer had permanently reallocated their waitstaff to a compliant secondary event. Chloe finally removed her dark sunglasses. She began to scream with a ferocity that shook the apartment windows. She accused me of meticulously planning this destruction for months out of pure malice. She lunged toward the coffee table and aggressively swept the black folder onto the floor. My mother began sobbing hysterically and claimed I had permanently destroyed the entire family ecosystem. My father stood up and aggressively pointed his finger directly at my chest. He told me I was a cold and calculating sociopath who cared more about spreadsheets than blood. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply stood up and walked to my apartment door. I opened it wide and stepped aside. I told them the meeting was officially concluded. I stated that they possessed exactly 15 hours to inform their 180 guests of the cancellation. I reminded them that the cascading floral installations were still actively wilting in the unrefrigerated delivery vans. The ultimate truth was undeniable. They had demanded a high-vibration aesthetic experience completely free of my foundational support. I merely provided them exactly what they requested in writing. They walked out of my apartment in a stunned and absolute silence. The door closed with a satisfying final click. The systemic collapse was absolute and heavily public. The following morning was Saturday, the wedding day. At exactly 10 o'clock, the Botanical Conservatory posted a formal notice on their main entrance doors. The notice explicitly stated the private evening reception was cancelled due to severe client liability failures. They locked the heavy wrought iron gates to the historical greenhouse. Chloe was forced into a massive and deeply humiliating public retreat. She had to mass text 180 elite guests on the morning of the event. She attempted to frame the cancellation as a sudden and unavoidable vendor strike. This pathetic narrative immediately disintegrated. The exclusive local catering collective publicly refuted her claim on their corporate social media page. They clarified they withdrew service solely because the client lost their required municipal parking variances. They completely destroyed her carefully curated high-vibration aesthetic reputation. The financial devastation hit my parents with immediate and catastrophic force. They had heavily leveraged their personal credit lines to fund the frivolous aesthetic elements. The custom-imported lighting rigs and the blush peonies were completely non-refundable. Because the event was cancelled due to client non-compliance, the vendors retained all initial deposits. My parents instantly absorbed $64,000 in pure toxic debt, with absolutely nothing to show for it. My father faced severe professional embarrassment at his corporate firm. He had invited several senior partners to the luxury event to boost his internal networking status. He was forced to explain the sudden cancellation without revealing his massive logistical incompetence. My mother was permanently exiled from her elite neighborhood social committee. The local gossip network quickly uncovered the truth regarding the cancelled commercial insurance rider. She went from being a respected socialite to a complete administrative pariah in 48 hours. They attempted to bombard my phone with furious text messages throughout the weekend. They threatened massive civil lawsuits and promised total excommunication from the family tree. I ignored every single notification. They possessed zero legal standing to sue me for withdrawing my own voluntary corporate assets. I had executed the termination sequence legally and precisely according to the master service agreements. They had built an elaborate financial house of cards entirely on my hidden foundation. When they aggressively pushed me out, the resulting vacuum crushed them completely. They were finally experiencing the true and unfiltered cost of their relentless exploitation. The aftermath of the collapse brought a profound and unfamiliar silence to my life. I did not experience a triumphant surge of emotional joy. I did not celebrate their total systemic ruin. I simply felt an absolute and clinical peace. The perpetual drain on my professional resources was permanently sealed. I updated my executive procurement portal on Monday morning. I purged all family-related vendor profiles and locked my corporate credit utilization to strict professional use only. The toxic familial ledger was finally zeroed out. My mother stopped calling. My father stopped demanding bridge loans. Chloe completely deactivated all her social media accounts to hide from the massive public humiliation. They finally understood the cold reality of the boundary I established. They realized they could no longer extract unearned value from my logistical competence. My negative energy was officially and permanently removed from their entire operational ecosystem. Do you understand the true value of quiet competence? Can you see how unseen labor holds up the world? I am 32 years old. I live in downtown Chicago. I secure high-level vendor contracts for events exceeding $1 million. I deal in risk mitigation and binding liability clauses. My family demanded a luxury aesthetic experience. I simply provided the undeniable consequences of a broken supply chain.